there are many wonderful tasks associated with being the president of the White House Fellows Foundation and Association, but I don't think there's any one task more pleasurable than the one I have this afternoon. And that is to honor and present Jack Valenti, chairman of the White House Fellows Award, to the late David Johnson. This is really a special award that we give, and it's in the name of Jack Valenti, who was a very trusted friend and assistant to President Johnson, and to whom President Johnson gave the White House Fellows program for him to oversee. And he did it during his time in the White House, and for some 40 years in total, he was the best friend the White House Fellows had ever had. He kept in touch with people, he entertained us at the Motion Picture Association events every year. He was just a supporter in every possible way. The award recognizes those who are not themselves fellows, but who have been very strong supporters and champions of the movement. So it is more than fitting that on our 50th anniversary program, we make this award to the entire Johnson family. President Lady Bird Johnson, Lucy James Johnson, and Earl Johnson. Because every member of this family has been an incredible supporter of the White House Fellows program. Now we know that the president, of course, created the program, and as we think about where he was in his tenure at the time he signed the executive order, it was October 1964. The election was the next month. He had a lot on his plate, but he, from the beginning, and Mrs. Johnson from the beginning, loved the idea of this program. The original idea of a national service program came from John Gardner. The idea was sent to Eric Golden, a young assistant to President Johnson, who reformulated it, made it smaller, made it really what it is today. And he gave the proposal to the president and Mrs. Johnson, and within 2 weeks, the president was ready to sign the executive order. So you can see from the outset, they were gung-ho about this program. And it was Mrs. Johnson who really liked the name the White House Fellows. So we owe to her, probably, the fact that we are now all fellows. From the beginning, they were both enthusiastic, but it was the president who put together what was to become the program and represent the values of the program. And the first most important thing he did was to name David Rockefeller as chairman. He was a prominent Republican, very well respected. He called on the phone, and I can imagine it's recorded somewhere, the conversation. And I think that David Rockefeller, who knew nothing about the program, of course, signed up immediately. There were other distinguished people, the Stanford Law School Dean, Margaret Chase Smith, John Gardner, and people of that ilk were put on the commission. A very important way to start this whole program. And then the second thing was to make it, of course, a merit-based program. No politics whatsoever was to be involved. It was to be based on a very rigorous process, and the applicants were to be judged on the merits. And then finally, the president wanted the positions that the fellows were to hold to be at the very highest level. And I imagine there were a lot of conversations also with his cabinet members about taking White House fellows they had never heard of before into their inner circles and making them a part of the departments they were running. And 4 White House fellows went to the White House. And I suppose the final thing was those first early groups of White House fellows were truly astounding. We know Tom Johnson, Walt Heumann was in the 2nd class, Doris Kearns Goodwin in the 3rd class, I mean, and many, many others, but they were outstanding young people, and they set the tone for what was to come. So after the program had been successfully launched, the president and Mrs. Johnson became very much engaged with the fellows. And as I say, it was completely merit-based, but Mrs. Johnson did observe that the 1st class had no women. She did. She did. The 2nd class had a woman. Jane Cahill Fiver, who went on to head NBC, I believe. And the third class had 3 women, including the other Doris. Doris Wordsworth. But they stayed very intimately involved with the fellows throughout the term of the president, and their relationship was such that the story is, we have a verification source right here, that Edwina invited the president and Mrs. Johnson to come to your apartment for dinner one night. And they did. And you think about that. The president had a fairly big agenda, and there he was at the helm of Tom and Edwina having dinner as though this was something the president of the United States did all the time.
In a 1-bedroom apartment on Seminary Forest Road, one of our children was in a closet, and it was my birthday. We didn't really have any friends in Washington. She called the private secretary and say, I think, you can imagine, we're sorry that Edwina's not here to tell the story, but we had no money, but she did go out and buy a dish in which to cook this food she had never cooked before. Her mother gave her guidance on how to prepare it. The president loved it, but it was quite an experience.
Well, if you only have one friend, this is a friend to have. But this was just the beginning. A decade later, Lady Bird Johnson became a member of the White House Fellows Commission, and she served for 4 years. Now, you know this is a huge commitment to read all those binders of applications and so forth. So it showed how much she loved the program that she came back. John Gardner was the chairman of the commission at the time. And there are a bunch of us in this room who were selected by Lady Bird Johnson and John Gardner, who apparently controlled, according to Landis, controlled the process, the 2 of them together. So they had very good taste, didn't they? They picked some very good.
How many of you were chosen during those 4 years with Mrs. Johnson? Look at that. Wow.
So it was, for us, such a treat, of course, that she was on the commission. She was a favorite of the commissioners, I think of the fellows as well, which is quite an accomplishment in and of itself. She was delightful, but she actually was a very tough questioner, as I recall. You could not put anything past her at all. Now, I think we were the first class to do a little skit, and we were a brave group to do this. We did a little skit before the decisions had been made, like last night at the dinner. And we portrayed Mrs. Johnson, Chief Mrs. Johnson, with her hulking Secret Service men who were everywhere, little things in their ears and so forth, trailing her around. And we knew, because we had met her, she was going to really enjoy that. And she laughed and laughed to see herself followed by these giant Secret Service men. She had a wonderful time. She was a wonderful person, and we all treasure having met her and known her even for that very short time. So now to turn today to the daughters and their support. Lucy Gaines Johnson not only came last night and hit the ball out of the park, as we were but she spent the day with us. She's a host of this event today. And we just appreciated your being here and this continuing support of the program. Her sister, Linda Robb, has also been quite involved with the White House Fellows Program. She lives in the D.C. area. She comes frequently to our events. And she's been very supportive, had the fellows in her home. So our support continues. But then the icing on the cake, which is just the incredible thing, is that I learned recently, and it astounded me, and I think none of you probably know this, but the 2 daughters, Lucy and Linda, have given to our campaign, you know that we're running a campaign for the support of the next 50 years of this program. Tom, Walter, very much involved, Randy James. They together have given a very generous leadership gift to the campaign. So they are not only supporting us now, they are supporting the program into the future. So, in recognition of all this incredible family has done over the life of the program, that is 5 decades, we present with deep gratitude the Jack Valenti Friend of the White House Fellows Award, to the Lyndon Baines Johnson family, with Lucy Baines Johnson accepting the award on behalf of the family.
It belongs here, and I have no doubt that mine will come. He is so wise and grateful and worthy of your confidence. Thank you very much. I only learned that this was going to be happening yesterday, and my eyes are out on stems. Not only just the size of this wonderful honor, but the spirit that comes behind it. My mother used to say, the way you can determine whether you are going to get involved in a civic cause is easy. You need to apply the 3 T's. And you can't give at least bountifully from 2 of them. You need to pass the cup. The 3 T's were time, talent, and treasure. And over a lifetime, it has been an honor and a privilege, but far more importantly, a joy for members of my family to try to give back to the White House Fellows some of those 3 T's, because you have given so much to the dreams of Lady Bird and Lyndon Johnson. You have manifested them with your heads and your hearts and your time and your talent and your treasure. And so another member of the Johnson family who learned at the feet of the master has exercised that Johnson treatment on his 2 siblings. But it didn't really take any convincing. Sometimes you just know what the right thing to do is. And giving back to the White House Fellows, as the Fellows have given to our country, is a privilege my sister and I are honored to be a part of. On behalf of generations of Johnsons, I want to welcome you again to the LBJ Library. The 50th anniversary of the White House Fellows is a marvelous celebration. And for all of us, it is so very, very personal. Personal for White House Fellows because you were judged to be the most promising young people of your time. You were selected as the most likely to benefit from a year of service to your government at its highest level, and the most likely to make your country a better place for us all. Personal for me, simply because of an accident of birth. The creation of the White House Fellows was also personal for my father. As a young man at the ripe old age of 27, Daddy was selected by President Franklin Roosevelt, his forever hero, to to head up the National Youth Administration in Texas. My father was thrilled to have the opportunity to harness this youth-filled enthusiasm for public service with the authority to really make a difference. He wanted such opportunities for future generations of young people as well. So, as we've already heard, on October 23rd, 1964, Daddy announced the creation of the White House Fellows Program. His words from that day capture his dreams for each and every one of you. Yours is the volunteer generation who seem ready and eager to take on the task which call for a real personal sacrifice. The country needs those virtues. We need your boundless energy. We need your curiosity, your inquisitive minds about every aspect of living. We need your belief that the impossible is only a little more difficult to do. The purpose of this program is to give the fellows first-hand high-level experience with the workings of the federal government and to increase their sense of participation in our national affairs. Johnson Treatment 101. Tom Johnson, one of the members of the first class of White House Fellows, joined Daddy's staff at 20. He became, as I said last night, the son my father never had, the brother I never had, and the chairman emeritus of the Lyndon Baines Johnson Foundation. You may know Tom as the aide to Daddy's press secretary, Bill Moyers, or as the assistant to the President of the United States, and as he has told us early and often, the note-taker of some of the most important meetings of the Johnson administration. You may know him as a lifelong stalwart supporter of the White House Fellows Program, or as the publisher of the Los Angeles Times, or the president of CNN. These remarkable titles are commensurate with those so many of you have achieved. They are kind of success stories Daddy hoped for all. However, Lyndon Johnson believed if you were going to effectively serve at the top, you also had to appreciate what the needs were from the bottom up. In fact, the highest compliment he could give anybody was that somebody was a can-do person. He often said, I am not interested in how it can't be done. I already know that. I'm interested only in how it can be done. No task should ever be beneath any of my staff. So I first knew Tom when he was plucked from the prestigious position of being the 23-year-old assistant to Daddy's press secretary to being the advocate of my White House bridegroom when it came to dealing with Liz Carpenter, my mother's press secretary. Liz was immensely talented and I loved her. But she was also, shall we say, formidable. So Tom was asked to help out. I'm not sure which was more challenging for Tom, dealing with the angst of Vietnam or the angst of trying to support a young groom being dictated to by Liz Carpenter. Daddy always graded folks on the results of their mission, and Tom got an A+. Sadly, my marriage did not survive. But Tom made sure we at least got the altar intact. Now, while this story may bring some levity to my speech, and all speeches need that, I assure you, I think it also brings home a very important aspect of what makes the White House Fellows Program so important. You can have the best professors in the world, but there is simply no substitution for having the best experiences. Experiences that stretch your horizon beyond your wildest dreams, as well as experiences that keep you humble in the midst of it all. Experiences that expose you to how lofty decisions are made and teach you that your decision will only be as good as your information. Experiences respect what it is like to do windows, as well as to recognize Truman's admonition, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. Tom surely had that exposure by being an assistant press secretary one moment, and the next moment being an advocate of the groom in the middle of the national wedding. Both must have had some element of war zones.
He lost his wedding shoes at one point, but I did find them.
But the prestige is very different. And you soon learn that what matters is the job gets done, not who gets the credit. In preparing for today, I was especially moved by a 1964 quote from the President's Commission on White House Fellows, and I'd like to share it with you. In this country today, we produce great numbers of skilled professionals, but too few of these intellectual elite provide the society with the statesman-like leadership and guidance in public affairs. If the sparsely settled American colonies of the late 18th century could produce Washington, Jefferson, Adams, Monroe, Madison, Hamilton, Franklin, and others of superlative talent, breadth, and statesmanship, should we not be able to produce more in this generation, even 10 times that number? We are not doing so. Surely the raw material is there, and just as surely more must be done in the development of our ablest young people to inspire and facilitate the emergence of such leaders and statesmen. These were the words that were your marching orders. And what an awesome directive they must have been. You came to government as chosen ones. Over 8,000 individuals showed an initial interest in the White House Fellows program. Only 15 were chosen. Your elders wanted to pass the baton to the best and the brightest, and after enduring fierce competition, you gave your youth to public service. I passed no such rigorous selection process, but in many ways, I gave my youth as well. Daddy didn't seem to believe in child labor laws. Volunteerism in the Johnson family was no more optional than oxygen. At just 16, I campaigned in 26 states for my father in front of groups from 5 to 5,000. I began volunteering for Head Start as an 18-year-old and left when I was 36, only because I was moving out of the country. My life on the national stage began at birth when my father was a congressman. I was just a year old when Daddy ran successfully for the Senate. I don't remember when he wasn't at the pinnacle of power as Senate Majority Leader. Like all of you who were of age of memory, I know exactly where I was when President Kennedy was assassinated. But President Kennedy wasn't just my president. He was my father's boss, and he was my friend. His was my first exposure to violent death. I can taste the agony of it all as if it were yesterday. The assassination that penetrated the nation's heart changed my life forever. It was all so very personal. My first night in the White House was an awesome evening. I have no doubt your first days in the halls of government were too. We moved into the President's house on December the 7th. The choice of the moving day was the only argument I can remember witnessing between my parents. When I heard their voices raised, I'm embarrassed to admit I went out into the hall and put my ear to their bedroom door. I'd never heard it. I was a post-war baby who had yet to take American history. I couldn't understand why my always amenable mother was protesting Daddy's decision to move into the White House on December 7th. Why would she protest the most convenient day for both Mrs. Kennedy and the Secret Service? Why did she keep begging for any other day? What was the deal? A course in American history soon taught me why. On December 7th, after 2 weeks of national agony, we moved into a White House still draped in black. My parents went that night to dinner at the house of their beloved staff member, Walter Jenkins. The Jenkins' daughter, Beth, was also my close friend. She came to spend the night with me. After days of anguish, I suddenly felt fancy. I was in a glorious room. I even had a fireplace. I asked Beth if she understood how to work a flue. I thought she said she did. We soon learned that neither of us did. My room went from being elegant to being, you guessed it, consumed in smoke. I inched my way to and from the bathroom, first dousing the fire with a small juice glass of water and later with a full trash can. I finally climbed up on my desk and opened the 8-foot window to let the smoke out. My eyes were greeted by the glare of a White House policeman looking straight up my nightgown. I had no underclothes on. I was just 16. I was so embarrassed I wanted to curl up and die. I feared my contribution to history would simply be that I burned the White House down. My first week there was spending helping clean the smoke off the walls of my room. No matter how traumatic your first days in the halls of government were, surely they weren't worse. It was all so very personal. I was at the White House family dinner table when Daddy told my Uncle Dick, Georgia Senator Richard Russell, that he was going to fight for the 1964 Civil Rights Act. My Uncle Dick protested, "Don't, Lyndon," and then grasped in horror at his familiarity, saying, don't go there, Mr. President." Daddy's protest was that, "I'm still Lyndon, Dick." But he was greeted by a, "No, and you never will be again, Mr. President." Then Daddy told his closest mentor, "Dick, I know I owe you everything. I would never be here if it were not for your help, but I am no longer just a senator from Texas. I am president of all of the people. I have to support the Civil Rights Bill. It's the only right thing to do." It was the right thing to do, but it cost Daddy his closest mentor. It was all so very personal. As a child of the South, I witnessed firsthand separate whites and coloreds water fountains and toilets. I saw blacks vanish to the back of the bus and the balcony of the movie theaters. I watched my mother tell a motel manager if there was not room for our black housekeeper in their motel, there was not room for us. I saw the shame of our separate and unequal nation. The 1964 Civil Rights Act was signed on my 17th birthday. No one will ever get a better birthday present than that. And I was on Daddy duty the day the 1965 Voting Rights Act was signed. I remember questioning Daddy, why are we going to the Congress for the signing ceremony instead of the White House, where most such events took place? I will never forget his admonition. We are going to the Congress, Lucy Baines, because there are many brave men and women who won't return to these hallowed halls because of their courageous vote, and many great men and women who will come who never could have come otherwise. That is why we are going to the Congress. He taught me another lesson that day, which I will never forget. When we returned to the car from the ceremony, I questioned my father again. Why on earth, with all those great civil rights leaders there, did you give one of those first pins to that Republican leader, Everett Dirksen? My father put his head in his hands in obvious disappointment that his own daughter felt the need to ask such a question. He said, Lucy Baines, which is what he always called me when I had been found wanting, and I'm afraid that it wasn't infrequent. I didn't have to do a thing to convince one of those great civil rights leaders to be for that bill. They were all ready for it. But Everett Dirksen, that's an entirely different matter. If Senator Dirksen hadn't supported this bill, those great civil rights leaders and I would have had a bill, we would never have had a law. Senator Dirksen deserved the pin, and I gave it to him. As you enter the LBJ library on both floors, you will see a list of countless pieces of legislation that were passed during Daddy's administration. In education, civil rights, health care, the environment, the arts and the humanities, consumer affairs, public broadcasting, and the list goes on and on and on. Legislation that was passed because the President worked both sides of the aisle and gladly gave the credit away. It was a lesson I will cherish always and wish our country could achieve again. But my lessons in social justice started long before the Voting Rights Bill became law. In congressional years, we lived in a section of Washington, D.C. fondly known as Hanukkah Heights, because my parents refused to live in other areas of town which still enforced restrictive real estate covenants. Daddy thought such covenants were simply reprehensible. My first employer was the first Jew to be accepted in an area when the real estate covenants were lifted. So when the Fair Housing Act became a law of the land, I was once again reminded how it was all so very personal. When it came time to sign the Medicare into law once more, I questioned my father why the ceremony wasn't taking place in the White House. Once more, I fear he was appalled with his own daughter, who hadn't gotten the very obvious lesson. He told me, Lucy Baines, we are going to Independence, Missouri, so President Truman can witness the ceremony. If no one else in the country remembers that President Truman began the long march to delivering health care to our people, at least I do. And I am going to give him the first Medicare card because President Truman deserves it. Daddy's lesson about giving the credit away have meant the world to me. The walls of the White House did not cushion the protests from Pennsylvania Avenue during our tenure. There were days when my wake-up call was, hey, hey, LBJ, how many boys did you kill today? And nights that the same refrain interrupted my bedtime prayers. My ex-husband served in Vietnam, as did both my brother-in-laws. For a year, both my sister and I raised our children without their father. We knew the sacrifice up front on all generations of our family. It was all so very personal. During these White House years, fellows did the research, wrote the speeches, helped with the policy issues, burned the midnight oil, and gave the best of their youthful intellect and substantive energies to Daddy's dreams for a great society. I was an eyewitness to it all, only because I was his child. So now 50 years have passed, and I have recently returned from the thrill of a lifetime, marching with President Obama and Congressman John Lewis over Selma's Pettus Bridge. There, President Obama told me I wouldn't be here if it weren't for your father. And Congressman John Lewis said the same to me. Public life remains so deeply personal. I am home now in Austin, working for the financial services business my husband Ian and I founded, mightily involved in my community and in my parents' legacy, and delighting in the irreplaceable joy of 13 grandchildren. As I watch my eldest grandson wrestle with the awesome decision of where to go to college, I remember that same struggle when I called the White House home. Such important decisions make all the difference in your life. I have read your resumes and know your decision to participate in the White House Fellows Program benefited all of us enormously. Over the past 50 years, your graduates have gone on to the pinnacles of power to serve your nation in your chosen professions and in the communities you now call home. You have been a member of the Senate and members of the Congress and Cabinet. You've held key leadership positions in the Departments of State, Defense, the National Security Council, and the military. You have led Fortune 500 companies, broadcasting networks, and a railroad. You've been the advisors to presidents, founded international organizations, been college presidents, and taught and consulted in such fields as international relations, economics, and arms control. A member of your third class, Doris Kearns, was, like Tom, a member of our extended family before she went on to be a Pulitzer Prize winner and a presidential biographer. Many of you have also made major contributions to your country while serving as White House Fellows. You've coordinated agencies to combat terrorism after the Israeli athletes were assassinated. You've co-authored a report that became a cornerstone of the nation's energy policy. You've helped save the U.S. taxpayer countless dollars by suggesting that since the U.S. had contributed so many troops, equipment, and leadership, the least our allies could do is contribute more financially. Your list of contributions go on and on and on. In short, you are what Daddy hoped you would be. Great leaders making great differences for us all. Today you gather with your fellow alumni to celebrate this 50th anniversary simply because you care. As Lucy Baines Johnson and I bear my father's initials and his commitment to social justice, the environment, health care, education, and all the dreams of a great society. Like you, I feel the awesome mantle of faith public life has placed in me. I feel the responsibility to pass on the rallying call of public service to the next generation. Ian and I have 13 grandchildren. I hope they will hear its rewards and responsibilities. I hope yours will too. Thank you again for answering your nation's call to service and for sacrificing so much for us all. You were Daddy's hope for tomorrow. You still are.